Hi everyone, welcome to this webinar, an Angeles Investors webinar. My name is Joshua Cardenas and I serve as Director of Growth at Angeles Investors. And today I'm with an amazing leader. Her name is Dr. Betty Uribe. She's a passionate advocate for leadership, and today we're going to talk about her book. This webinar is called The Number Values Advantage, Building Culture, Trust, and Results in Business. Welcome, Dr. Betty. How are you today?
Thank you, Joshua. Fantastic. Very excited to be here with you and your audience.
Amazing. No, we'll have a great time, a great chat, and I'm pretty sure that we'll get a lot of insights out of this conversation. And I was reading your book, which is amazing, by the way, and I
Thank
could
you.
notice that there's a story behind it. So I would love to start with your background, what you've done and accomplished over the years, and what motivated you to write this book.
Well, my background, I was born and raised in Bogota, Colombia, and my father was an entrepreneur, so I became an entrepreneur. Came to the United States at the age of 12. My mom sat us down and said, "Hey, I'm going to the United States." My father, although he was very successful, he was also an alcoholic, and he used to beat up my mom. And so one day, my mom sat us down and said, "I'm leaving. I'm going to the United States, and who's going to come? And you can stay here. You'll never need anything, or you can come with me, but we're going to have peace." That was my first value centered decision that I made. And it actually begins when I was born. I wasn't even supposed to be alive when I was born. And that's something that's not very well known. The doctor told my mom, get the funeral arrangements made. That's why my name is Betty. It's the tiniest name that would match the size of my body, which is very tiny. But I lived, and so I feel like God had different plans. So fast forward 12 years old, my father almost beat up my mom pretty badly. And she said, I'm just leaving the country. I don't need the money. I don't need anything. I just need to have peace. And we all made the decision. And that was my first value centered decision I made, was to come to the United States at the age of 12. And I remember my mother, being a woman of society, in the United States, she became very poor, and she started working at a factory. And I made a vow to myself that someday I was going to retire my mom, but I was going to need education to be able to do that. So I set out to educate myself, and I collected degrees throughout my career. And I remember my very first company that I had was a biomedical engineering and manufacturing company. We manufactured surgical lighting components. Kaiser Permanente's gynecological light was my light. I was 19 years old when we started that company. And I've been a serial entrepreneur in manufacturing, in healthcare, real estate, automotive, in different areas. But I became a banker after getting rid of my very first company. And I remember getting a $10,000 bonus about a year and a half after I started. And I called my mom at the factory and I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I am on a break." And I said, "Well, I'd like you to go to your boss's office and you tell your boss that today's your last day and you're never going to work again in your life, and pack your bags because we're going to Mexico." And I spent $10,000 on my mother during that vacation. It was amazing. So for me, that was a dream. That was really the reason why I think I went back in my doctoral program to really write about values. I started looking at what core values my mom taught me throughout my life. My father eventually left alcohol and he became a gentle, beautiful man, and he taught me how to be an entrepreneur when I was very young. And I thought that he was lonely, but he would take me to visit the employees and to visit the drivers and to visit the suppliers and so forth. And that's how I learned. Eventually, I inherited my father's transportation business. And so it was really easy to say, my name is Betty Rengifo. Rengifo is my father's last name, it's an Italian name. And I would say, on my father's honor, I'm going to be paying everything because I had left a cousin of mine to run the business, and he ran it pretty much to the ground. So we paid everything, but it was easy to run it because my father had already introduced me to everyone, and I already knew from the time I was under 12 years old. I knew everybody, and they knew me, and because of the way that my father ran his business, they trusted. So um, I've been in banking and in entrepreneurship for a long time. I became, I guess, the highest position that I had. I ran a $250 billion operation with JP Morgan Chase, turned it into 358 billion in 2.5 years during the pandemic, and that was all value centered. So what I learned in my doctorate was how to hire based on values, how to grow people based on values, how to grow a business based on values, and how to create sustainable results based on values. So I wrote the book and in the book, I interviewed generals from the White House and the Pentagon, interviewed CEOs from finance and CEOs from business, large businesses in the contiguous United States. And my intention was to really learn how value centered leaders led with values and created sustainable results. Because at the bottom line, we need to create sustainable results so that the company or the organizations or the kingdoms or the countries that we're running run almost without us. So that was the reason for writing the book, and that's a little bit about my background. I live in Southern California, and with my husband, we between the two of us, we have 5 children and 3 grandchildren now. And today I'm a strategic advisor for kingdoms, countries, and organizations that want to either catapult themselves to a place where they didn't think that was possible, or also strategic advisor for the leaders themselves. So when the leader wants to go to a place where they haven't been before, then that's where they call me.
No, no, quite a good story that you use. I'm also Colombian, so I know that that's something that not only in Colombia, but all over the world, a lot of people has to go through when they're young. So I know how hard it could be. And you know, it talks about your leadership style, how you surpass that issue, and then you've pretty much accomplished a bunch of different things, and now you're consulting a bunch of kingdoms and countries. So that's amazing. And you know, in the book, you say that a values-based leader acts in congruence with exposed values, and it leads with integrity, focuses on the good and of the whole, and strives to make a positive impact. And you know, the core traits are congruency, integrity, whole system focus, and positive impact. My question is here is, which trait do leaders overrate and which ones do they underestimate? Because you know, some people like more like the trust and culture, and a quick fact is that only 31% of US employees were engaged in 2024, which is a 10-year low. So trust and culture is something that has been declining. So how do you improve that, and what are those traits that leaders overrate and underestimate?
That's a really good question, Joshua. I think we underestimate the power of transparency and humility. I think that when we become leaders at the very beginning of our trajectory, we think that we need to know everything. And so we try to fake it till we make it. And being a great leader is also being a great listener and listening into what's not being said, listening to the question behind the question, trying to really understand where our people are, because at the end of the day, it's the people at the street corner that really have all the answers. And a lot of times we feel like when we're at the 30,000 in the corner office that we have all the answers. We don't. Our people are the ones that have the answers, and our clients are the ones that have the answers. And so when we turn things around and we realize that it is them who have the answers, and our job is to be transparent and to genuinely show our care based on our actions. People don't care. Theodore Roosevelt said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that is something that is completely underestimated in leadership today. We think, and many people come to me and say, oh my gosh, my boss is going to fire me if I don't get the answer and this and that. I'm like, wait a minute. When was the last time you had a genuine conversation with your boss? Do you trust your boss? Do they trust you? And 9 times out of 10, they'll say, it's been a long time since I've had a conversation like that, or I've never had a conversation like that. Do they know what your spouse does? Do they know about what you do on weekends? Do they know what you do for fun? 9 times out of 10, I hear, no, they don't. And so all they care about is, what have you done for me lately? And I hear that a lot. And so we underestimate the value of caring. We underestimate the value of transparency, of telling our people. They already know when things are not going well in the company. They know before we do sometimes. And so by trying to cover things up to our people, it's almost disingenuous. And so the trust levels go down. And remember, when you build trust with your people, the productivity goes up, and it's been proven. There's been studies. Stephen Covey writes about the speed of trust, and he talks about the higher the trust, the higher the speed of implementation. And this is part of why we are always able to turn things around very quickly, because the first thing we focus on is building trust. That we underestimate. And I think we overestimate the sometimes we get cocky because we think we're really good. And when we begin to move in the direction where our performance starts to go up, we get cocky and we think that we've already made it. And what happens is, in performance, performance goes down before it goes up. So as soon as it starts going up, our job is not to just make it up. If we get cocky right when it starts going back up, then all of a sudden our people see it, and then we make it about, look what I did, instead of giving credit to the people who are really at the street corner doing the work, instead of elevating the people. I remember one time, when I first joined an organization, and there were some amazing production that happened, and I talked to my people and I said, okay, who was responsible for all of this? They gave me about half a dozen names, and I said, okay, I just want you to know the people that were responsible for this. This individual who's from this department did this and this. This individual from this department. And I named them by name, not giving any credit other than where it needed to be. And then I copied all of the heads of the different departments for the entire company on that, as well as the people that I recognized. And that CEO replied and said, oh my goodness, great job, everybody. Imagine what that did for the people. Immediately, there was a splash of, oh my gosh, she recognized, she noticed. Oh my gosh, she didn't make it about herself. It was really, oh my gosh, my name to the CEO all the way up, like how many levels? It was amazing. So we overestimate the path, what we think we get when we get cocky. We make it about us, and it isn't us. It's the people around us who do all the work, and it's our job to elevate them and to let them know how much we really value them based on our actions.
Amazing. No, you're right. Sometimes leaders tend to get cocky, and that's definitely an issue. And but I would like to understand your process in terms of the framework that you built, because in the book you use the Rockich schema, in which determine values, which is the ends, and the instrumental values, which are the means. In the study, you mentioned that senior leaders' top terminal values were family, health, spirituality, wisdom, freedom,
Them
and
and
top
self-expression.
instrumental values were honesty, courage, responsibility, helpfulness, loving. So how do you translate those ends and means into a daily decision filter?
Oh, it's huge. So, just to clarify for your readers, the instrumental values are the values that we use throughout our career and throughout our life. The terminal values are the ones, if you think about what am I going to think about, what am I going to be grateful for in my deathbed at the end of my life? What are my terminal values going to be? And so it's interesting that the instrumental values, the values that these value centered leaders that I interviewed demonstrated were honesty. They were honest with themselves and each other throughout. So if you're not performing, they're not gonna sugarcoat it. They're gonna say, you know what, you're not performing. What's going on with you? Is it motivation or is it capability? Which is it? How can I support you? Before they would be written up. So they're honest with the person, and you always want somebody to be honest with you. They were courageous because they said the truth, and they cared more about the person than they cared about how they looked to that person, if that makes sense. Being loving, being caring, being genuine, being helpful, and being capable, those are values that are instrumental, meaning the values that if I am capable, what does that mean? I don't take for granted my education, and I also don't take for granted my experience. So I consistently become better. I'm reading, always reading. I'm always getting coached. I've had personal coaches that I have personally paid for throughout my life. Even when I couldn't afford it, I knew that I needed to get coaching. So I went out and got a third person that would just really take a look at me and begin to hone me, people that knew more, that were there. So those are the instrumental values. And that's how these leaders put them through. For me, the way that I have used my instrumental values is I figure out, okay, how do I hire somebody? Well, I want somebody that is honest. And so I would go to the door person and say, how did they treat you when they walked in? Before they got in the elevator and came up to the 10th floor or to my floor to the corner office. Then I go to my administrative assistant and I say, how did they treat you when they came in? If they didn't give you the time of day, they have no business in my team, because I want them to genuinely be caring and not to just care for me or show care for the title. I want them to care about the people that they work in. So that's how you operationalize the instrumental values. And then the terminal values are really interesting, because at the end of your life, what is it that's going to be most important to you? Well, it's family, it's your health, it's your spirituality, having wisdom, and all of these things. So that's what I tested. I tested them for both. But something that was really interesting is the bottom values. So the bottom values of these value centered leaders were social recognition. So they cared more about uplifting their employees than of getting themselves the credit. A world of beauty. Being self controlled was not important. It was one of the bottom values, meaning I don't need to control myself. I need to just be there for my people. When you are too controlled, your emotion gets out of the picture and you're no longer approachable to your people. And so when you just show up as being yourself, then that's the opposite, right? Then it's honesty and transparency, which were the top core values. And be funny. You'll find this funny, Joshua. Being obedient was a bottom value. So we are, I don't know that we are disobedient as much as we look at things just because somebody said so. We question with innocent curiosity. So, why does it have to be this way? Is there a better way of doing this? So, it isn't being disrespectful to a law or an ordinance or a mandate. It is really being genuinely questioning what has transpired and is there a better way? Does that make sense?
Does it totally does. And going back a little bit into not getting cocky, uh, you mentioned something that is called a platinum rule, right? And it's beyond the golden rule. The platinum rule is treat others the way they want to the way they want to be treated, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And it maps well to style flexing for trust. And usually a study suggests that uh, managers that are globally engaged and driving team engagement and empathy that are empathic and they are tailored for leadership, they level up the performance of their employees. And that's what was you were mentioning, these people that got mentioned in top of the C in front of the CEO, and they was like, hey, I'm feeling fulfilled because I was mentioned, right?
yeah.
um, can you please explain me how do you practice that empathy as a leader without lowering the bar on performance? Because that's something that leaders sometimes misunderstand. Like I cannot be too empathic because then they're going to take my arm and they're not going to push as they should. So
Yeah,
how can I make it so that it's leveled up, right? And I do not lose performance.
yeah. In Colombia, we say, me toma la mano y le doy la mano y se toma el codo. I give him the hand
Exactly.
and he takes the elbow. Uh, being practicing they want to be treated, you have to know how they want to be treated and you have to take the time to really get to know them. To someone, a note, a private note, you're doing a great job, is bigger than being put in front of other people. Some people, based on their culture, the Chinese, for example, the Japanese, they get embarrassed when you raise them up and they don't want to have the spotlight. So you've got to understand the nuances of the culture, of their background, of what they preferences they have in order for you to be able to practice the platinum rule. And so you have to take the time for them. Now, how do you recognize them and honor them without having them take your elbow, right? Without having them not have a high level of expectation. People will perform at the level that you set for them. If you expect excellence and you give excellence, you've got to be the one to give 100. Correct. It's 100%. And so, fairly, if I give you 100% of me, there's the law of reciprocity that John Maxwell talks about. And if you look at in neuroscience, it's the mirror neurons. The mirror neurons in our brain, they cause us to want to mirror. For example, if I do something for you, you feel like, oh, I better do something for her too. If I give you something, then you're going to want to reciprocate. It's the law of reciprocity. So if I show up 100% and I give you my 100%, then you're going to want to do that. I took on a mentor at Genius Network, and this mentee, a young man that is really rising, and I gave him my 100%. The moment he started talking, he actually talked about this at Genius Network this week. He said it from the podium, he said, I told him to give me the toughest mentor, and they gave me Dr. Betty. And man, she saw me coming. I wasn't being truthful, and she said, okay, cut to the chase and tell me who you really are, because I can't help you if you don't tell me who you really are. And I expect you to be your best, because if you're not, I'm going to drop you like a hot potato. So it's up to you. I'm not for everybody, but I am for you if you're going to give me your very best. And guess what? I got the very best from him. And I continue to get the very best from him. And as a result, I am exposing him to people in places, in situations that in a million years he will never be exposed to. But that's because he's being honest, he's being authentic, he's giving himself his very best. And of course, I'm going to give myself as well.
And I have a question that you say like you need to discuss with your employees, get them to know you so that you can better understand how to drive performance in them, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes people mislead this to becoming like a toxic culture that is micromanaging and getting to know the person and what it's doing 100% of the time. Let's turn the table around and talk about the toxic culture on leadership and how you can solve
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Can you please tell me about an example of toxic culture that you've seen and how would you have solved that and what values should be involved in order to solve a toxic culture?
Absolutely. There was one team that I took over where fear, it was a fear-based culture. People were afraid to say the wrong thing. For me to go to branch visits and to visit the locations, I saw that everything was perfect and it was too perfect. And so I would start talking to the lowest paid individual first. And I do that on purpose because number one, they usually get overseen. People only go to like the highest paid person. So I start with the lowest paid person, and they would say, "Oh, well, we're expecting you today." I'm like, "Oh, you were? Okay. Then I'm just going to show up unannounced next time." And so, but showing up unannounced, not to micromanage, but to lift up and to recognize when people are doing something right, not look for when they're doing something wrong, but show up to recognize and to elevate. Then all of a sudden, I had people asking, "Can you come to my branch next? Can you come to mine, please? Oh, when are you coming to mine?" Because people saw that not only did I lift them up, but I also gave them ideas on how they could begin to increase their performance, but not from a punitive way, but from a recognition, from a place of gratitude and recognition. Gratitude is the secret sauce in leadership. When we recognize people and we genuinely thank them for doing the work, it's amazing what happens. One time I was visiting and I asked somebody because they were doing such a good job. I said, "So what's your why? What is it that makes you do such a good job?" And this individual said, "You know what? My mother has taught me to do well, and I just want to make her proud." I said, "Well, where's your mom?" "Well, she's at home. I support her." And I said, "Is she at a place where we can call her?" And he looked at me and he said, "Yes." I said, "Can you put her on FaceTime for me?" My mom? He said, "Yeah, put her on FaceTime." And so he put her on FaceTime. And so I said, "Mrs. Such and Such, I just want you to know." And I had an entourage with me. And I had the employee right in front of me. And I said, "I just want you to know that your son is doing such a fantastic job, and it's an indication of how you raised him. I want to thank you so much for raising your son to be an honest man and a hardworking man. We rely on him. And the customers here, I've been watching him with the customers, and the customers absolutely love him. And I just wanted to tell you, I am the managing director, or I am the senior vice president, the executive vice president. I do that often. And I just want you to know that your son is very highly regarded in this company." The mother started crying. The son was crying. My employees were crying. They could not believe that I was doing that. And people just don't take the time to do that. The next time I went to this office, the mother had made me the most delicious tiramisu, and she wanted me to have some tiramisu. She made like big things of tiramisu for my staff. And just as a gratitude for just calling her and telling her thank you. And it's something so simple. It doesn't take more than 5 minutes to do something like that. But genuinely being grateful for the people doing the job, in people making our clients feel like a welcome guest in their home because that's who they are. That's how they were raised. So doing things like that is amazing. Gratitude goes such a long way. But you got to be genuine.
Perfect. And now discussing into a little bit a different topic, and it's about taking decisions. Yeah. And when you gotta decide as a leader, sometimes there are the easy decisions and the difficult decisions that you gotta take a look. And you said it. You used to manage a 200 billion company, and that's a lot of pressure behind you, right? So, and that's where it really it's and you have the people that is corrupt and the people that take bad decisions for their own personal
Yes.
you know well-being. And when making decisions, what are the values that have to be behind that
The
decision as
decision.
a good leader? Yeah.
Well, I'm so happy that you asked me that, Joshua, because I came up with a values-based executive decision model in my dissertation. And one of the things that I came up with that I always do with my teams is what values are we going to make this decision with? This particular decision. So, for example, let's say we're making a decision, and I remember distinctly when we made a decision on compensation. And it was a compensation for referrals that were made from one department to the other. Who gets the credit? And that came up to me. The toughest decisions always come up to the top. And so I said, okay, let's get both sides, both departments at the table. And then let's get the next generation to be at the table so that we can get the next generation trained on how to make value centered decisions. And then between all of us, I would say, okay, what values are we going to make the decision with? What's most important for this decision? And they would say, well, the customer's always right. Whoever did the work gets the credit. Those are the values. We want to make sure that we recognize the work that's being done, not necessarily with compensation, but also with recognition. And creating a win-win is really important, meaning the collaboration between the two departments. We don't want to break the collaboration. Quite the contrary, we want to bring the collaboration. So when you do that, and think about this, Joshua, this also goes for your mother, your father, your children, right? How are we going to make this decision? My daughter, when she was in high school, she broke a rule, and I said, okay, so what's most important, and what happened, and how would you like to have the repercussions to you breaking this particular rule? We ended up having her write a whole book on The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey Jr. And so after she wrote it, then she gave me the book and she said, okay, I understand now why it's so important for me not to break trust from you, mommy. Now she wrote it and she made the decision that this was going to be the ramifications for her doing something wrong. So I do that. Now, as an executive, and you said it, Joshua, we're called to make tough decisions. And so I always have veto power. And so I bring in the group or a working group to work out the kinks in the decision. And then we bring that decision along with all of the data that we utilize to make the decision to the team. And if the team can't make a decision, I make the decision for the team, making sure that they understand the core values that I used to make that decision. And so that they understand this is the data that we looked up, and this is how we looked at the data, and this is what was most important in this decision, and this is why I ended up making the decision, and this is the decision. And people feel like it's fair. Absolutely, it's fair. You listened to us. You took a listen. You were grateful for the work that we've done. You took all of the information that we put. We had values designated to make that decision, so we knew what was most important to us. And then you listened to us, and you made the decision based on what you felt was most important. That's how we do it.
No, and you're right. It's and you feel more confident when you have your team backing you up on the decision, and you can say if you have to decide by yourself because you disagreed with what your team was suggesting, then it's like I at least saw their point of view, and then I had to take the right decision because I'm in the leadership position, right? But if the team made a great job, it's hey, they had a great point, and I need to use that information, right? And I think that's really valuable. And to finalize this session, this amazing session, Dr. Betty, I want to touch the topic that everybody is talking about now, and it's AI and tech, AI, and ethics, right? We'll know that's a hard topic now for leaders. And about 42% of enterprises are actively deploying AI. We see how these leaders are cutting off thousands and thousands of people that has been backing them over 10 years, 20 years, employees, right? And what would you suggest in terms of AI for a leader? What values should you keep? And this is a tricky one. I want to ask, what do you think about the leadership that is, you know, firing employees because the AI now is replacing them, and what values are behind that decision?
Well, it's interesting because we could have said the same thing for ATMs when ATMs came on board. We could have said the same thing for the internet when the internet, I mean, all those books that we used to carry around when we were in the university, all of a sudden we don't need to do that. We can just go into the internet. We could have said the same thing when the phone went into something like this. That's my husband. When the phone went into this tiny little phone, and now we have a computer here. And what are we going to do? We're going to fire the people that were making the big computers? No, there's always going to be a job for everybody. So we cannot stay stagnant. I started using AI before the pandemic. I joined a users group because I wanted to understand it from the inside out. And I trained the regenerative AI. You can train it to have your voice and you can train it to do all of that. That's dangerous. Why is it dangerous? Because I can say you do all the work for me, and then I'm teaching a course. I'm teaching a I have a mastermind and certification program right now on leadership with Pepperdine University, and so my students are taking train your AI to have your voice and to understand who you are. My AI has my dissertation, my book, all my I put everything into my AI so that then I can say, how would you respond to something like this? Or I think out loud with my AI. At the end of the day, I am the one that is responding because I don't let anything come out without it being my own voice. So I review, I correct, I say, nope, I don't want, it's very simple. I use AI like I use my executive assistant. My executive assistant before I would say, I really want to write something to the team. I want to do a memo. And I want the memo to talk about Mother's Day. Let's just say something simple. And I want to recognize all the mothers, and I want to recognize the fathers who are also like mothers because they're single parents. And I want to be able to do something like that. Can you write something around that? Now, my administrative assistant knew my voice. That was, say, for example, Egda, and she's one of the best assistants I've ever had. Or Gloria, another one of the best assistants I've ever had. And so they would write something and they would bring it to me, and I would say, notice, I'm the one that came up with the idea. I'm the one that said, write something and let me take a look at it. Now, by doing that, I was training them also to be great writers and to have my voice so that if I was in an emergency, big responsibility that I could just say, hey, can you do this? Make sure that you send a message to this person and let them know that it was from me. Then they would send it with the same genuine care that I would have written the note, and they would say, this is from Dr. Betty, or this is from Betty, or whatever. So with AI, being responsible means owning every single word that is in that document, owning every single word that is in that reflection paper. I have my class folks write a reflection paper. I allow AI note taker to be in the classroom. So I'll have my students and I'll have all of the note takers. And some of them had never seen a note taker before. So I say, there's Otter and there's different note takers. Go ahead and allow them so that you can have your mind set in the class and you don't have to worry about taking notes. So those are the ways that you can use AI in a responsible way. And as long as we have humans that have feelings and that have strategy, that have experience, personal experience, you're never going to lose your job. So it's a matter of, okay, how do we stay in front of it as leaders? How do we take the responsibility to stay in front of it? It's our responsibility to stay in front of it and to utilize it in a way that is ethical and that is moral, so that our employees know that we are the ones that are driving, not AI.
Amazing. And one last question that I wanted to ask, and it's a little bit like a last recommendation that you can make, and maybe that we didn't discuss in here because we discussed a bunch of different paths into leadership. But what's one last thing that you would like to recommend to the leadership and leaders that are hearing us today?
The best of this year, I spoke to 2,500 kings and queens and uh, people from governments, presidents, prime ministers, members of Congress, Parliament, members of Senate. And when I stood up there, I said, "Hi, my name is Betty. I was born in Bogota, Colombia, and I came to the United States when I was 12. I don't change who I am just because I'm speaking to world leaders, 2,500 leaders from 91 countries. That's the most powerful group that I will probably ever address in my life. And very few people have an opportunity. I was the only non-government official that spoke to them. And so for me, showing up authentically is the most valuable place that we can be. So it doesn't matter who you're addressing, be yourself. Nobody knows how to be you, only you know how to be you. And don't let titles intimidate you. It was interesting. I would go to Secret Service and I would say, "Hey, I need to know Prime Minister of this country. Where are they seated?" "Well, they're seated at table number 2 or 3. Can you take me?" And I would go up to them and I said, um, your Royal Highness, I'm going to be introducing you in just a little bit. Can you answer one question for me? In the last 6 months, what have you done personally to make a difference in the citizens of your kingdom, or to make a difference in the citizens of your country? And I ask very poignant questions because I want to introduce them as who they are. And I said, everybody knows your title. I want them to know your heart. And lo and behold, I would introduce him and I would say, I would play with the audience and say, well, guess what? Let me tell you who's coming. It's the person who did this for their citizens in the last 6 months. Can you believe it? Give them a round of applause. You can read their bio. Now I can tell you who the man or the woman is behind this title. And it was amazing. So be yourself. Don't try to be somebody else. Always trust your voice. I have 10 recommendations in my book, and they're in my chapter 10, and they're the what I call Dr. Betty's top 10. And it's really owning your own value, trusting your own voice. And so there's 10 pieces of advice that I would give to your audience.
Amazing. Now everyone should read the book. Uh, you're leading them to that. No, the book was great. and a lot of insights. And this conversation was more than amazing. I
And I'll
like
tell
to.
you, if your audience, and I'm saying this not to make them buy the book, if any of your audience wants the book for free, go into my website, drbettyuribe.com, and put the code hashtag values 100%. That you won't have to pay for the book. I will give you the book. But please, after you finish, my only request is that you give it away so that I know that you're paying it forward and you're making a difference for someone else.
So we'll put the code on the chat. But I want to leave everyone with the lesson is lead so what you stand for is visible in what you choose under pressure. Credibility, integrity, and are the bedrock of followership. And people must admire honesty, being forward, looking, inspiring, incompetent. So use values as a compass that aligns ends with honorable means and clarify your terminal values that are the ends you seek and instrumental values, how you behave, and let them decide trade-offs when the costs are real. Remember to be empathic and to listen to others before doing a decision. I think those are the main insights we got out of this conversation, and I appreciate you, Dr. Betty. And my last invitation, my last call is for everyone that is watching us today to join us as members at Angeles Investors. We have a great leadership, over 700 members, 40 sponsors, all included leaders like Dr. Betty that are Fortune 500 executives and great leaders. So that's my invitation for everyone on the chat.
Thank you
And
so
and
much.
yeah, thank you everyone. Thank you, Dr. Betty, and this is it. Bye bye.
Bye now.